Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lula, and today I want to talk to you about chess notation.
Modern chess openings?
It's the best book for you. It will tell you all you want to know. You'll need to learn chess notation before you can read it. The names of the squares. I'll teach you now.
So chess notation is the language by which we describe and record chess moves and chess games. If you want to start playing classical chess, over the board chess, get your FIDE rating, that kind of thing, then you're going to need to know how to understand and write chess notation. The kind of notation we use is called algebraic notation, although it has nothing to do with algebra. It describes the chess squares using letters and numbers. If you've been playing chess for a very, very long time, or maybe you picked up an old chess book, you will have seen something called descriptive notation. This is no longer recognized by FIDE, so you shouldn't be using it to write down your games. Descriptive notation might come up in something like the Queen's Gambit, where they say pawn to king 4 instead of e4. So descriptive notation did use numbers, for example, pawn to king 4, but instead of using E, A, B, C, D, E for files, they used the chess pieces. So king is now E for us. I don't want to confuse you too much by talking about descriptive notation, but it's just a part of chess history that you'll come across at some point, so I wanted to mention it. So if you want to start learning how to read and write chess notation, I would recommend you start from white's perspective, because this starts from 1 and A, so it goes chronologically in our heads, and that makes it easier to understand. Then when you're playing with black, you can essentially reverse the board. If we know that we start with A and that there are 8 files and 8 ranks, then we know we go to H for the final file, and we know that for ranks, we go from 1 to 8. So we already know the scope of our board. Once we know that our grid starts at A1 and ends at H8, we have a contained space to work with. And I would recommend, if you're playing over the board chess, to play on a board which has these numbers on it. If you prefer, for your chess.com board, you can change it such that your coordinates are outside of the board instead of inside of the board. But personally, I prefer them inside, so I'm going to keep them that way. As with anything in chess, there is going to be a bit of hard work required. You are not going to memorize these overnight, but you can create some kind of anchor points to refer to. So once you know the starting positions of all of the pieces, which I hope you know if you're thinking about starting to play classical chess or reading chess books, which are the two main reasons to learn notation, then you can start to associate these pieces with the files. So obviously we know that rooks are at the flanks, so they are A and H. This is not very difficult to understand. You have an A rook and an H rook, and it might feel slow to work backwards this way, but in your head, even if you are not a good visualizer, which I'm not, you know that rook, knight, bishop, and then king and queen. If rooks are A and H, knights are B and G, bishops are C and F, which leaves D and E for the queen and the king. If we think about the king's pawn opening and the queen's pawn opening, which are the two most common openings in chess, then we very, very often hear them referred to by their algebraic notation. So we have very famous Bobby Fischer quote, which is E4 is best by test. I know this is much harder if you're a beginner, because you're probably a beginner in every form of chess, as well as learning chess history and chess culture, and maybe that just doesn't interest you at all. You can also remember that the D pawn is the queen's pawn. We have the queen's gambit, and we know that the queen's gambit is D4, D5, C4. Therefore, if the queen's gambit is a queen's pawn opening, we know it's going to be D4. It is likely that, like with learning a language, you are going to learn bits and pieces and basics before you start to be able to form full sentences, aka read PGNs, which are full lists of moves for games. But if you can memorize just the opening that you play in its notation form, then you're already starting to situate yourself with the squares on the board. So if I play the Spanish or the Ruy Lopez, I know that it's an E4 opening that requires E5 because it's an open game. So E4, E5, knight F3, because it's my knight that's by the E pawn that comes out, knight C6, bishop B4, and then, okay, we have some deviations. If I know my opening, which is the Spanish, and I know this off by heart in notation, then when I am learning variations of it or notating it, I kind of already know which squares are occupied by pieces on the board because I will have played this opening X many times. If you want to, you can try out the vision tool on chess.com, which will ask you to find squares based on their coordinates. I'll give you an example. It's been many years since I've tried the vision tool on chess.com. So h1, okay, d3, okay. I mean, it's obviously easier when you have the coordinates on. You can uncheck coordinates if you want to. But like I said before, I find it easiest if you situate yourself as white and then work from there. So as you can see, I usually find the file from white's perspective. Oh, I misclicked. I usually find the file from white's perspective and then I work outwards from there. Fine, I'm talking at the same time, so hopefully you'll forgive me. This is timed, okay? But it doesn't really matter what your score is. What matters is practicing and finding where the squares are. Like, you could give yourself 10 seconds to find each square. It doesn't really matter. But if you think that this will help you to situate where things are on the board, then you should definitely start a habit of doing this. So I've pulled up one of my games here for the sake of showing you notation on chess.com, and let's take a look. As you can see, we have this kind of pictorial notation where the knight is represented by a knight, but we have standard pawn moves. So if you're not really sure how to read this, basically every piece has its own either picture if you're on a website or reading a specific type of book, or letter associated with it. So B for bishop, Q for queen, K is for king, I should specify in English, N is for knight. Okay, so you need to be careful not to mix up K and N because I've seen many people do it. R for rook, and for pawns, we actually don't associate a letter with them because pawns are not pieces. They are their own thing. So for pawns, we actually don't clarify. That's why we can just say E4, and E4 refers to the move and the square. So even though E4 is a square on the board, if you're reading it in a chess game, obviously it means something's gone there. What went to E4? A pawn. Okay, so when we talk about captures, we have an X. X for exchange, I guess. X for exchange. I want to talk to you about castling, which has its own notation. So for long castles, it's triple O, O with hyphens. And for short castles, it's just OO. So this is the only way to notate castles. And it's because, you know, it is the only move where two of your pieces move at once, so would be very hard to notate in a clean way otherwise. A couple of other changes are that when you play a check, you add a plus sign onto that check. So it doesn't matter if it's a capture, you still notate the capture, but the check will always be added at the end. For a checkmate, which sadly we don't have in this game, you would have a hashtag. So you can actually turn off the figurine pictorial notation on chess.com if you want to. If you're learning how to read and write chess notation, this might be helpful for you. So as you can see, we have letters for all of the pieces now. And it is worth mentioning that when we refer to a piece, we give it a capital letter. This just makes it clearer that we are actually referring to a piece, because obviously an X is also a letter for captures, but we're not referring to a piece. It's lowercase. So everything will be lowercase other than the pieces that we refer to. I would also say that it is quite rare you'll be playing a chess tournament on a board that does not have the coordinates on the outside if you're just playing standard chess tournaments. This is because the standard chess sets at tournaments are the kind of vinyl roll-up chess sets that pretty much always have coordinates on them, unless you get very unlucky somehow and get given the oldest chess set from the back of the cupboard. I remember when I played in the Olympiad, some of my teammates had not gotten used to playing without notation on their boards, and certain DGT boards do not have notation on them. I also attended a chess tournament once where somebody defaced the DGT board by adding the coordinates onto it because they could not notate otherwise, which is like such bad karma, right? You have to be like, something has to be wrong to be defacing like hundreds of pounds worth of equipment to make it slightly easier for you to notate. But definitely just worth taking time to practice before you go to a tournament in case you do get into a situation where you don't have notation provided for you. Another thing that I will say is that I have lost count of the number of opponents I have played who have not notated correctly in our games. It is incredibly common when playing against children that they do not notate properly. But this is something that is almost never punished. And I'm not saying that to say you don't need to notate, because you absolutely do. And if your opponent is pedantic, they will call the arbiter over and tell on you if your notation looks off. You also aren't allowed to stop notating if you're playing one of these 90-30 tournaments, which is pretty much the standard time control these days. When you both have an increment of 30 seconds, there is no point in the game where you're able to stop notating. It's quite uncommon actually to play a classical game where you are allowed to stop, because everything has increment these days. So this is when it really starts to favor you if you're good at notating. If you've played a lot of chess games, notated a lot of chess games, and you and your opponent are in time trouble, then who is spending more brain power and time and energy thinking about their notation and fixing their messed up notation? Because yes, it is very common for people to mess up their score sheets, mess up their notation. And if you do so, you need to correct it on your own time. So I had a game once where my opponent asked to see my score sheet. She had just played a move, my turn. She asked to see my score sheet. So I said, okay, I gave her my score sheet. And then the arbiter came over, smacked the clock, and she said, you fix your score sheet on your own time. Then I got a little bit of extra time. Whilst my opponent fixed their score sheet. This was at the Olympiad, so arbiters are watching very, very closely, which is not common at most tournaments. I did not tell on her, for the record, it wasn't me. But this was something that I didn't know about because I was still relatively new to chess. If you want to start learning chess using chess books, then you are going to be setting up these positions on a physical board in front of you anyway. So even if you're not very good at notation, as long as you have your board in front of you, hopefully with coordinates on it, you are going to be able to follow the notation in the book based on the fact that you now know what it means, if I've done my job correctly. The simple act of reading the chess book and putting the pieces on the board based on what the chess book says should be good practice for you for learning where the pieces go, where the pieces start, learning the variations of the openings that you play, because again, this should be a lot based on pattern recognition for you, playing the same openings, probably seeing a lot of the same variations. You are not trying to memorize in your head every single opening that's ever happened. And you're not even trying to memorize every variation of the openings that you play, I would hope, because you are a beginner and not a grandmaster. I hope this video has been helpful. I hope that you will very soon be able to laugh at jokes like never play f6, which is a classic Ben Feingold quote referring to weakening your king with the black pieces, which if you don't know which square f6 is, then you will not get the joke. But yeah, I think that honestly, it will come to you naturally the more chess analysis you do, even the more game reviews you read through on chess.com. But I do very, very often get requests about beginner chess books, which I have talked about on this channel. I have a video on it if you want to watch it. Beginner chess books are not going to be any good to you if you can't read notation, if you can't understand chess notation. I hope at the very least that you waited until the end of this video to pause me and go and do the vision game on chess.com, and that you just haven't had me on pause for the past 20 minutes whilst you spam the vision game. But I'm just going to pretend that that didn't happen. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.